Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to RGA Live. Today, we're going to be talking about creating metaverse experiences for brands. My name is Tuomas. I am the Managing Director for Asia Pacific at RGA. And in this first segment for today, I'll be joined with Connie, who is the Head of Strategy for China at RGA. So Metaverse itself isn't actually a brand new term. So Metaverse was first coined in the sci-fi novel Snow Crash back in 1992. And ever since then, we've actually been talking about different things around Metaverse for a while. So it's inspired movies like Ready Player One, for example. And on the other hand, some of these things that are coming to life today are built around early versions of video games, for example. So back in 2003, Sims was a first attempt at an avatar-like experience for people where you get to represent yourself in a digital form and interact with others. And kind of the third thing that's happening is back in 2018, Bitcoin having launched and started this whole cryptocurrency movement. So what happened then in 2021 really is that these trends started converging. So we have these three different things that basically make up the next evolution of the web, which is what we call Web3 and the Metaverse. So on one hand, we have this society shift to virtual, which was definitely accelerated by the pandemic. So time spent online has accelerated pretty dramatically. Our perception of value has shifted. And also the way that we look at our identities online have definitely shifted. The second thing that's really happened is that this gaming and virtual worlds are becoming more and more immersive. So the experiences we have in the virtual world have really shifted and been created into more immersive experiences. The way we socialize together online now have shifted through avatars and things like that. And in a way, our creative expression has been enabled to levels that we haven't necessarily seen before. And kind of the final thing enabling all of this is everything that's happening in the blockchain space and cryptocurrencies. So the way we look at digital value and digital proof of ownership through NFTs and things like that, the way that we handle and trade digital money, and the way that we build digital communities that are decentralized have really accelerated as well. So what this means is there are new platforms, new channels, and new behaviors that brands can take advantage of. And there are essentially new behaviors that consumers are inhibiting as well. So when we look at these behaviors, these new platforms, these new channels, they can broadly be categorized in two different ways. So you have these centralized platforms. And what I mean by that is platforms that are owned by single companies, single entities. And a lot of these gaming versions of this, if we look at Roblox and Fortnite, they've actually existed for a while. But for the purposes of the metaverse world, they've now started being kind of wrapped around the same umbrella. So things like Meta's Horizon Worlds and Minecraft and Fortnite, these are centralized platforms that are owned by single entities. And the other category are these decentralized platforms. So this is essentially the Web3 platforms enabled by things like MetaMask, which are essentially cryptocurrency wallets, OpenSea type NFT marketplaces, Sandbox, Decentraland. You would have heard about a lot of these things. And on the other hand as well, you have platforms like Earth-2 that are migrating to the Web3 world at the moment. So these are decentralized platforms. And what this means is that this new Web 3.0 world has different marketing tactics and different user expectations that we might have seen in previous iterations of the internet. So these are things like 3D worlds that we're creating, avatars and how we enable these avatars and people to express themselves creatively through avatars. These digital wearables that are ownable now and people can wear and again, express themselves differently online. But also you have new identities being formed, you have new status, you have early adopter communities, you have new versions of loyalty. But also through the cryptocurrency and blockchain ecosystems, we can do things like utility tokens and unlocking different things online and offline, airdrops and things like that. So essentially what we're seeing is this evolution that takes us from this very unnatural way of interacting with the web and interacting with each other online. So basically an evolution that takes us from scrolling to strolling. So how do we go into this world where we're essentially strolling the internet together with others and socializing and buying things and interacting in new ways? So what this essentially means is that these worlds that are enabled and created in the metaverse and enabled by Web3, they're more interactive than we might have seen before, but they're definitely more immersive. When we look at things in a 3D sense, in a 3D world, we definitely live in a more immersive world online. But also they're social by design. You know, people are interacting with each other. So these are very, very social platforms and social experiences that we will be taking part of. So from a brand's perspective, there are different things that can be unlocked and can be enabled. So there are definitely ways to drive awareness and perception of your brand. Being able to build communities and be a part of these communities can drive awareness of your brand. But in many ways, there are opportunities for much deeper engagements that we would have probably seen in some of the other internet marketing ways. And also there are different ways to create value. So these value creation things are some of the things that we're going to talk about in our panel in a little while. So essentially, these are communities. These are new types of communities. These enable new experiences, new opportunities to create value, and new opportunities for brands to play a role in all of this. So with that, I will be handing over to Connie to talk a little bit about some of the approaches that brands can take in the metaverse.
Yeah, with all these new interaction of tech and spaces creating a new level of mixed reality, the metaverse will look like anything you could ever imagine, and the possible space we can attempt in it are numerous. Currently, we see brands trying to own their share in this space in 3 different approaches. The first is, of course, the comedy and Wally scene, which is creating virtual items in form of NFT as investment, rewards, and collectibles. Mainly product-based and with relatively low entry level, it's commonly used by brands to create social hypes and talkability, hence the easiest and most popular for brands to dip their toe in the metaverse. Next. This is particularly popular among luxury, fashion, and gaming category, which are leading the trends and development in the meta space. Brands can also create bespoke experience on either their own brand platform or some open metas platform. This is popular when brands want to announce their first entrance to the metaverse, either in form of an activation or a seasonal campaign. Leveraging on the more established platform and a familiar brand-owned infrastructure, it gives consumer a taste of how the brand would look like and feel like in a whole new virtual world with greater and easier accessibility. The third one is to create a sustainable cyber brand based in an open metaverse. We see brands announcing their purchase on lands on Decentraland or Sandbox, etc., showing their ambitions in creating a new shared reality that brings people together wherever they are to be entertained, to collaborate, to shop, to learn, and more in this ever-evolving brand world. This is the start of many international brands like Nike, Coca-Cola, P&G, BMW to demonstrate how they change from selling to their consumers to building a community with their consumers together. We see these 3 approaches can work individually as well as inclusively, allowing brands to create permanent but also evolving presence in the meta space. And to move past this hype-filled reactivity and keep an eye on the future of metaverse, we have our panel guests here today to share and discuss on how these pieces of fundamental are going to evolve into more and more, as well as to discuss on topics like what opportunity are there for brands, how to get started, what have we learned so far, and what does the future hold?
Thank you very much, Connie. With that introduction in mind, I would like to introduce our moderator for today's panel. Welcome, Robert Sawatzky, Editorial Director at Campaign Asia.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that intro, Tuomas, and also to both you and Connie for that great overview. There's a lot to think about there, and I'm sure that we'll circle back to a lot of it as you join our panel. I'm thrilled to moderate. There's obviously a huge brain trust here, which is great because so many people are students of the metaverse. But let me introduce our other guests who are going to join the panel. Shane Isaac is the founder of Earth 2. I would describe it as a recreation of our existing planet in virtual form, but we'll have him describe what he's doing for us. He's an avid gamer, a futurist, a technophile, loves user-generated content and community-driven creativity. And he's looking to build long-term sustainable metaverse that's influenced by its participants. And I know that many players of Earth 2 are joining us today, and we're likely to get some questions from them as well. Dean Sciole is Marketing Director for GM Premium Imports in China. Before that, he was Cadillac's Marketing Director in China. And these are apparently dream jobs for him, since they combine three of his loves, which is China, cars, and technology. Dean also comes from the agency world. He's worked at Saatchi & Saatchi and TBWA Hakuhodo as writer, planner, creative director, leader, and he's married with twin 3-year-olds, and that must keep him busy and grounded. So let's get into it. I think we'll go for about 30 minutes, and then we want to leave some time for audience questions. So just a reminder that you can put your questions into the chat, and we'll try to get to as many as possible by the end. So let's get started. Dean and Shane, if you can have your cameras on, and we'll kick this off. So let me start with Dean. Maybe since you're the brand in the room, I still don't see your camera, Dean. If you can turn it on. Let's see. Oh yeah, sorry, I do see you. So we've seen a lot of luxury, a lot of fashion brands, a lot of gaming brands involved in the metaverse. There maybe aren't as many traditional brands. There are some some banks and so on, but what's your interest as a kind of a car and mobility company, and how to get started?
Yeah, hi everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here today. Well, I guess the first big interest that we have in being involved with the metaverse is to not be considered a traditional brand. I think brands like Nike and Louis Vuitton and Gucci are doing some really interesting things in the metaverse because they've got a real clear understanding of their customer and what their customers are interested in. And similarly, our interest in the metaverse will largely be driven by the desires of our customers. Relevancy is the lifeblood of brands. Metaverse right now is very important to them. So if they're in, we're in.
Great. Do you see like metaverse as a kind of initially it's like you want to be driven by customers, but you also kind of have to be, I guess, aware of kind of what competitors are doing. As a brand, do you sort of see it as a experiment or something kind of that, or in a way a tactic, or do you see it as something larger that could really disrupt the industry in a way?
That's a great question. I think it's easy to do the shiny objects, but the potential of the metaverse, I think, could be fundamentally transformational to our business. And I think that's where we want to spend our interest, is really understanding how that can happen.
Great. Shane, let me turn to you. You've been in this a long time, creating a whole new metaverse world. I know some people may think that you can create a world in 7 days, but I know you've been at it a long time. Your challenge now, though, is to give us the 90-second version of kind of what Earth 2 is and what inspired you to build it.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Robert, and thanks for inviting me along to this panel. And hello, everybody. So yeah, I mean, we're about 17 months into building Earth 2. And as far as metaverses go, I think this is really, really early days. There are obviously other platforms who are in the metaverse space that took really years to put together, and their vision is probably not quite as grand or on such a grand scale as Earth 2. So in the scheme of things, we're still in the very early parts of developing our metaverse, I'd say, and we are in this for the long run. So it's something that we are committed to now and over a number of years into the future. I think the 90-second rundown of what Earth 2 is in itself is a little bit of a tall order. I mean, Earth 2 means so many different things to so many different people, and it's difficult to summarize it and articulating it without, I guess, misrepresenting many of those views. But in a nutshell, Earth 2 is a geolocational metaverse, meaning there is a direct correlation between real world locations and the digital representation of those locations inside of Earth 2. Hence, where you're standing right now in the world has a digital representation inside of Earth 2, and that digital representation will grow and expand over time as we roll out future technology. I launched the MVP of Earth 2 in November 2020, and ironically, I actually launched it as a side project. It wasn't a project that I was fully focused on at the time, but people quickly fell in love with the concept. And we, shortly after, I think it was around December, we went into hypergrowth with a range of statistics that would probably challenge almost any startup in history. It was a very, very nice time to look back on now, but it wasn't very enjoyable for me at that time. Just literally dying trying to keep up with it all. So what we did, we released a digital grid or layer of land that spread across the planet Earth, and we split that into what we advertise as 10 by 10 meter plots or 100 meter square plots. However, the actual size of those plots are larger, which the Earth 2 players will find out pretty soon as we kind of cover that detail on E2 version 1, which is our 3D planet that we're building to release. But more or less, until now, like, people have been able to buy, own, trade, sell, and lightly customize their land. And they've done that at scales. Like, we've had sales in between players of land that they've purchased into the tens of millions of dollars. So, you know, this is all in fiat. We launched as a fiat company, and we're kind of dedicated to moving to Web3, but this has all been based on actual fiat currency based on US dollars. I think with your next question, I think the best way for me to answer what inspired me to build Earth 2 will probably be just to cover what a metaverse is, or what the metaverse is or should actually be. And I think that's probably something beneficial for me to cover in this panel, just in general, before moving forward. It may become like a conversational point or something we can refer back to. In my opinion, there's 10 different things that I think are critical to defining a metaverse or the metaverse. But I know we're on a tight schedule. I know I'm probably going over already, but I'll just cover like 5 of them very quickly. So for me, number one, the metaverse has to be big. And I'm talking about the metaverse, not a metaverse. There are probably going to be strings of metaverses that come off the centralized metaverse. But for the main metaverse, it has to be big. It has to be something that you can like zoom out on and look down upon. And it's expansive. It's huge. You can go to all these different locations inside of the metaverse and explore them. It's not something where you feel like you're in a shoebox and you can only see a very distinct kind of close area around you. That, to me, that can be part of a metaverse, but it's not actually the metaverse. So I think the metaverse, in what all of we should envision, should be like big at scale. The second thing is, I think the metaverse, as much as possible, needs to feel real, as though it truly exists, and or the closest it can come to existing. And for me, those first 2 reasons are what kind of kicked me off into releasing Earth 2 or inventing Earth 2. The way that Earth 2 feels as though it exists is because of exactly that. It's based on real world geolocations that we relate to. Therefore, now and also into the future, as we release more and more products, you'll be able to be in Earth 1, you'll be able to even access Earth 2 and see what's kind of happening around you. And therefore it creates this real sense of existence for the metaverse. It's more like an alternate reality as it is compared to like a server that operates deep down in the dungeons of AWS or wherever it may be. The third thing is, I think the metaverse has to have a long-term sustainable economy. And that economy needs to have the ability to reward those who are participating in it. And setting up that economy correctly long-term means that it will support the longevity of the metaverse in itself, but it will also be an amazing platform for brands to bring their presence into. Number 4, it does need to be decentralized, or as decentralized as possible, providing irrefutable ownership on key digital assets to its inhabitants. This includes things like DAOs, minting of digital assets on the platform, decentralized utility tokens. As Robert, you pointed out a bit earlier, yes, Earth 2 is currently centralized. We launched as a centralized platform, but for a metaverse to be a true metaverse, I do think it needs to be decentralized, and we are committed to that, to kind of moving that out. I also think that the metaverse in the future will be much too big, powerful, important to be run alone by one corporation. So I think that's something very important to take into consideration. Number 5, the metaverse needs to support creativity. This also means that it never stops expanding and it never stops adding new things over time. It doesn't become stagnant because it supports creativity, not only from players or individuals, but also businesses who can use those tools to create a presence inside of it. For Earth 2, we're aiming for photorealistic type of end game graphics, but I know a lot of the others are, they're aiming on different levels, but it should have that creativity or the ability to create. And the platform should reward those who make those creations for what others need, want, or derive happiness from. So, there's a lot of other things, like it should be all inclusive. It should have its own social media platform. It should be able to exceed the boundaries of reality as we know it today. It should be competitive. I think it should have game elements. It should feel busy. It should be in 3D. So the big thing about the metaverse is moving from 2D to 3D environments and experiences at scale. So there's a lot of other things it should be, but that in a nutshell is what we should be thinking, I think, from a metaverse perspective. Sorry, I know I ran over time. So.
And it's a tall order to create all of that at once, right? Which is what you're trying to do.
It's a very tall order.
But what was good there is you kind of went into my next question, which is like, what do kind of people that are operating in Earth 2 or in other platforms in the metaverse kind of really value? And if we're talking a lot about brand participation, and you referenced that there. So my question is, from your perspective, for instance, is brands coming in, you say it'd be good, they need to kind of reward participants, support creativity and that kind of thing. When they come in and they look at kind of it's quite often the obvious thing to do is to try to say, how can I take my products and services and right away kind of replicate them in the metaverse? But if you're kind of looking at it from that lens, how can they, how should they be treating them maybe differently on a platform like Earth 2 or others?
Yeah, I don't know if they would in particular like treat them differently. I think a lot of brands who are obviously operating in what we call Earth 1, so Earth 2 we look at as like a separate metaverse, but inside of Earth 1, I think essentially the first thing will be is to kind of stick to your guns in what you're creating. You've got a brand, you've got awareness, and it's going to be about moving that awareness into these metaverse platforms. And there are massive opportunities, as Dean already pointed out, with like Nike and Louis Vuitton and all these kind of platforms moving in to create digital assets in the metaverse or the Web3 field. It's just about doing what they do, but it's going to be digital. It's going to be 3D. They're going to have to focus on building out teams of 3D model designers as opposed to teams of people, or factories creating clothes or other type of brand items. This is just inevitable. And I think to answer your question more directly, what do metaverse participants in particular value in their environments? I think it's exactly this. It's exactly what they value in the real world. I mean, you look behind me here, I've got little things that I collect and I like myself. It's the same inside, it will be the same inside the metaverse. It's the same inside centralized games at the moment, like Fortnite or League of Legends, or all of these platforms. They have the ability to purchase perks that new designs for their avatar or these additional digital assets. It's the same inside of the metaverse. People are going to want to collect things. They're going to want rarity. They're going to want things that beautify themselves or their avatar or their environment. And I think it is important for them to actually earn that, as opposed to, or purchase or earn that, as opposed to just being given it too freely. So it does actually have purpose inside of the platform itself. It's something that we're focusing on in Earth 2, is that we'd like to create intrinsic value into everything that enters Earth 2. So there is actually a process to building things in Earth 2, as opposed to just creating the 3D assets themselves. There is actually an economy where you do need to mine resources. You're going to be able to process those resources into building blocks by eco-sim building. So there are going to be players who actually focus on doing this, much like in the real world, where we have factories and manufacturers that provide things for us to build real world objects.
It's interesting, and I want to bring maybe Tuomas and Connie in here as well. you know, obviously you must get, you know, questions too from brands kind of looking to come into the metaverse, and there's all kinds of questions about whether people actually, you know, they might like the same things, but there are questions being asked about whether people actually behave differently as avatars or want to be sort of someone else sometimes in the metaverse. And so if marketers are kind of looking at how to approach audiences, what's your advice on how to treat them, whether like, you know, differently or the same? Tuomas, maybe I'll toss that to you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the main thing to keep in mind that there are still real people behind the avatars. Kind of what Shane mentioned earlier. Avatars do provide a way for people to express themselves differently, and perhaps these expressed behaviors might actually come to life a little differently that you might behave in the real world. However, behind these avatars are the people whose needs and wants and desires are going to be very likely quite similar than they are in the real world. So what we are seeing a lot actually from brands that have entered the different decentralized or centralized metaverses is that people tend to actually support very similar brands in the metaverse than they do in the real world. So if you are a fan of, I mean, I'm using the cliche example, I'm aware of that, but if you are a big fan of Nike and you like wearing Nike sneakers in the real world, it's a very, very high likelihood that your avatar is going to be also wearing a limited edition Nike or something like that. And that value creation that comes to the brands and creations then come in the way that people express themselves in there. So I would say keeping in mind that real people behind the avatars have similar behaviors is quite key for brands to keep in mind.
We have seen some examples where, you know, people may behave as different in the metaverse. Sometimes it's not. There have been a few examples where it hasn't been great. There have been some concerns around creating a safe, inclusive, equitable metaverse environment. So, Connie, when you know, do brands come to you with kind of those concerns, and how I'll get others to weigh in on this as well, but you know, how large a concern is that, and how front and center is it when kind of creating a new avenue for them to talk to people?
Yeah, I think brands do have these kind of concerns, but talking from the China point of view, I think a lot of the platforms and brand operators here are still going in a highly experimental steps into the metaverse. So a lot of time they will think about the brand purpose and what's the role of the brand before this kind of security or intellectual property kind of question yet. But at the same time, this will be definitely something that we keep in mind when we are recommending brand to proceed in metaverse.
Do any of you have other, you know, thoughts on that in terms of kind of, I know, you know, Shane, you were talking about, you know, making sure it's kind of, you know, everyone there's kind of mass participation. Part of that is making sure things are equitable and inclusive. You know, what do you have any, you know, comments around that?
Well, yeah, I mean, inclusivity is very important. I probably have a couple of comments around this, I guess. I think, like, from a gamer's perspective, this is like a long-running joke inside gaming communities since forever. Like, so I think for the average person, this might be something a little bit new to them, where you have, you know, either an attractive avatar that may or may not represent a male or a female, but obviously, you know, it may be a female, but there's actually a male playing it, or vice versa. And this has been like a long-running joke inside the gaming community for some time. But as the public start to dabble in the metaverse, this is going to be something that people probably catch on to quicker, but they don't yet understand or get it. I do think, like, something I'll point out probably might be something interesting to consider. I do think, like, moving inside of the metaverse and using Web3 technology, I think everybody inside of there, doesn't matter how you're represented as your avatar, you're going to have like a digital footprint. And if I had my way, and I think this is the general way that Web3 is heading, is that digital footprint you would have some control over, which is a little bit different to what we can say for kind of traditional types of social media platforms who, you know, they trace everything you do and create these kind of hidden reports about everything about you. I would think moving into Web3, this is something that you can hopefully control a little bit more yourself and customize it, but you will have this digital footprint. And I think that's going to introduce some really interesting scenarios for brands, because depending on how accurate that digital footprint is, for example, you may have a situation where one avatar is walking up to this 3D digital experience and another avatar is walking up to the same experience. There is actually this opportunity for the brand, and this is just something I've thought about myself personally. There's actually an opportunity for the brand to identify the customer and even portray two different environments to that customer to attract them. It may be a store that sells beer and wine. For one avatar, they might be advertising the beer application and the other might be advertising wine, but they're both heading to the same stall or store. I think there would be some pretty comedic situations there as well, when you have two different looking avatars heading to the same store for different looking reasons. You're looking at one avatar who they're seeing something completely different, this avatar's seeing different. And yeah, so that may be, that probably will be comical in a sense. But yeah, it's definitely going to be a long-term thing to build this a safe metaverse, a safe platform. And it is kind of common knowledge that we are Earth-2. We are going to release our own social media platform, and it's a little bit too early to say, but I do hope that our platform can also be decentralized in many ways, that it's more the community participating in the various spaces of that social media platform, as opposed to one central body running it.
Yeah. A lot of brands have the question of kind of worry maybe about kind of selecting the right platform now, obviously, whether it's, Earth-2 or Sandbox or Decentraland, etc. If they're considering, putting time and effort into it, where do I begin? Connie, do you get that a lot? And kind of what's the situation like in China?
Definitely. In China, there's no established or inclusive meta platform like the Decentraland or Sandbox yet. So I think platform and brand operators are quite cautious about their every move. Tech giants like Baidu, Tencent are introducing their own originated metaverse, but they're not totally open or designed for all users yet. More of like a showcase of their capability and edge in certain territories. For example, Tencent wants to own entertainment and NetEase want to own corporate events. So I think the questions for brands would be, how do I leverage the nature and specialties of these different platforms to match my brand purpose, to optimize the experience for my target, and where and how to reach out to the early consumer group to start my virtual community. And the more important thing is how to strike the balance between brand control / intention versus the dominance of the platforms.
Dean, I want to ask you, since you're the brand here too, what are the things that go through your mind when you're kind of then considering everything, platform kind of going in it, and or any risks that we're talking about? What's kind of tends to be front and center?
Sure, Robert, I think that's a great question. And I did want to respond to your earlier one about inclusion. I think we as brands need to take the responsibility to make sure that all of our environments are safe and inclusive, and especially in the metaverse where there's a little bit of anonymity. And I love how Shane said people may portray themselves differently. But from a brand standpoint, that's so important because sometimes we make assumptions by the little we know of someone, but watching them in the metaverse and how they portray themselves may be different, but it may be an inner desire that's actually more important for us. As brands, we want to connect on an emotional level. And if they're free to express that true self, we should be very willing and open and inclusive to respond to that. So we're really excited about the potential, everything that Shane just mentioned. In terms of where we should be, I'll take the easy answer and say we're going to follow our customers in a lot of ways and see what they make popular. Obviously, as Connie said, we're a little concerned about investing in any one, over-investing in any one platform currently because it may not be here tomorrow. We will look for platforms and owners like Shane and Earth-2 that have a bigger vision that I think will deliver what people are looking for and have a higher potential of success, we'd be very interested in platforms like that. We're going to shy away from the fly-by-nights that are in it for a quick buck, that are obviously, won't have the longevity. So
I guess that's
I think, Robert, also one of the things that we have run the risk of now from a brand's perspective is running towards the shiny thing. So I think an important distinction is not to necessarily work on distinctive metaverse strategies, for example, for your brand, but actually flip it around and figure out how the Web3 and metaverse actually delivers for your existing strategy already, whether it is a brand strategy or a commercial strategy, and what parts of those commercial objectives can be supported by the metaverse or any Web3 technologies. I think that's a very, very important distinction now, because otherwise we're going to invest in something completely separate and distinctive, and that may not actually build towards our overall objectives.
So that's another kind of advantage of kind of being thoughtful and aligning it with your brand strategy. What about kind of the benefits of acting now? Some maybe brands may be weighing kind of risk of kind of being kind of some of the the first to move in. At this stage, I think though we're seeing enough brands participate that there's maybe no longer first mover advantage. But is there some kind of advantage to kind of acting now as and kind of just ensuring that you're involved? Tuomas, do you want to take that one as well?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's the obvious awareness and perception benefits of being first. There tends to be a disproportionate amount of press space being spent on the first movers, so that's kind of one sort of low-hanging fruit, I guess. But again, you have to do that thoughtfully, and it has to build towards your strategy. But also, I think what the most important thing is, the earlier you get in with a thoughtful strategy, the quicker you can start getting the learnings that work for your brand specifically. I think, as with any innovation, as with any new things, you're never going to get it 100% right. You just won't. But the more you try different things, as long as those things are inclusive, equitable, safe, thoughtful, and don't in any way harm the brand, the faster you experiment, the faster you actually find your own way in that space. And I'm not just talking about awareness and experiences, but there have been brands that have been able to create loyalty programs, communities, new ways of providing customer service, and even commercial models within the space. And I think you can only create those models if you're in, and if you really truly understand how customers and people interact with your brand in these spaces.
Right. I'm going to get to some of the audience questions and some of the questions that were sent in advance, just shortly. But Connie was talking about already kind of some of the differences in China. I just wanted to ask about the rest of Asia Pacific. So many different markets that may be different places, and both brands and developers are maybe approaching the metaverse differently. Tuomas, what are you seeing in terms of the different approaches, I guess, kind of across Asia Pacific that you're seeing when it comes to the metaverse?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We're actually seeing a very similar trend that with any new technologies that have evolved in Asia Pacific. For whatever reason, if you look at communication platforms, so different chat applications and things like that, there are certain markets where WhatsApp is very prominent. There are certain markets that have kind of inherently gone with a platform like Line, for example. And it just comes back to a lot of the cultural nuances of what is made available through those platforms. And the same thing is happening with these individual metaverse-like experiences. So if we look at markets like Korea, Zepeto has become a very, very prominent platform there. And if you look at markets like Singapore, they tend to gravitate more towards the decentralized sandboxes of the world. So I think it does come down to looking at it market by market and looking at which platforms are popular. However, I actually think more than market by market, what's driving scale at the moment is that there are a lot of platforms out there that are pretty deep in Web3. You do have to have a level of technical savviness to be able to have your crypto wallets and your MetaMasks and all that kind of thing to play things like Decentraland or participate in them and own digital assets. Whereas platforms that are more app-based like Zepeto or Roblox that essentially leverage on the fiat currency trend tend to have a higher following at the moment. And those actually might be good places to start for brands because the barrier to entry for both brands and customers alike might be a little lower at the moment. So while there will be cultural nuances and decisions made by market, I actually think the accessibility of these platforms is the main driver of early scale at the moment.
Great. Okay, let me get some of these questions. Just a reminder to everyone that you can put questions in the chat, and we'll get to some of those. But we also have a few of the advanced questions that we can get to that we had submitted as well, by people that were going to attend. One of them sounds kind of very practical if you're talking about kind of using VR. How do we host events with VR experience when few people have headsets? Do we rent, or is not everyone has a headset at home? So does that limit, I guess, the audience and availability? Connie or Tuomas, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can take that one. There have been some really creative ways that brands have solved this already. One of my favorite examples is from the New York Times, and they created this VR experience for people. And what they essentially did was send these cardboard VR things to all of their subscribers. It didn't cost them a lot, but together with your New York Times, you got a cardboard version of a VR set that you could then use an app on your phone to do. So that's one really creative way of scaling a VR experience, where perhaps it's not exactly the same experience as you would get with a high-end, VR headset. But these sort of versions will enable people to experience that world through their mobile phones and through the cardboard headsets. I mean, the obvious things of renting and providing them to people and things are there. But I would always say, when you're creating an immersive VR experience, you have to also consider how that experience would work outside of the high-end headsets the world, and what's the scaled version of that experience for people to enjoy.
Mm-hmm. Another question we had was, how is the metaverse beneficial to the brand besides awareness and connection building? Some of this we've talked about, I guess, already, in terms of kind of ability to for instance, there is the ability to sell products and so on. But maybe Dean, since you're again the brand here, if you're looking kind of like beyond awareness and kind of building connection, what do you see the main benefits for you?
Sure. It's a great question. And let's not discount the benefits of awareness and connection. These are very important things for brands. But first, I'll have to confess that I may not be aware of the full potential of the metaverse just yet. I'm still learning as well. But the little that I actually do know of the metaverse, it has the potential to really fundamentally transform our business. Just the idea of changing the concept of ownership and value with the NFTs and the blockchains, evolving the concept of community and socialization and personal expression, with the DAOs and the decentralization, extremely exciting. And just enhancing the role that we play in terms of brands and products in people's lives. I think we haven't even begun to tap into that yet. So like everyone else, I'm really excited to see where the metaverse can take us, and just know it'll be an exciting place.
Mm-hmm. Shane, maybe you can address this one. We had a question on how critical the interoperability of virtual assets is from one platform to another, for instance, and are there challenges, and are there solutions that you see when, say, there are different developers with different interests, different companies involved trying to make this happen, but getting, I guess, kind of different metaverse platforms to speak to one another, to allow people to transfer virtual assets over. How difficult is that, and how do you see it working out?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it is something that I think most people outside of the developer world really don't understand, especially with the way that NFTs have been rolled out over the past year or so. I mean, NFTs are, I don't think a lot of the NFTs that have been rolled out are going to have a large amount of operability inside of any given metaverse right now. A lot of people don't understand that to create that foundation for a 3D game or a metaverse or whatever you're building, there are different rules for different technology and different kind of engines that are delivering different models and different platforms in themselves. So interoperability is something we're not going to have true interoperability for quite some time. until either the hardware technology significantly catches up, or metaverses come together with a common consensus of this is how we're going to build our models, and they're all going to be interoperable over every platform. And I don't see either of those kind of happening in the near future. This is one reason, like in Earth 2's example, why I didn't kind of follow with the whole NFT hype train with handing out NFTs that don't have any purpose or operability inside of the platform. Like for land itself, we're going to have purpose to that in the future inside of Earth 2. When we roll out our NFTs, I want them to be something that you can actually feel and use inside of Earth 2, as opposed to something that might just sit on your wall. That's something I think that the interoperability on the scale that you guys are envisaging is really a long way away. And just one other very quick point, Dean and Thomas made some really important points about jumping into any metaverse too quickly. I think it's way too early, and I'll just share a very short story that we had in our experience during hypergrowth on Earth 2. We're partnered with a company called Mapbox, who I'm sure you're all very well aware of, and we ran a test to our community, or to our players, people accessing Earth 2, on which businesses out there would want to advertise on Earth 2. And we still have a database of over 10,000 people wanting to advertise on Earth 2, but we had amazing response, but we realized it was way, way too early for us to dive in and make a mistake in facilitating advertising that didn't make sense or didn't properly, accurately represent what advertising should be inside of the metaverse. So we still have that database, but we realized that it is way too early to jump into, even ourselves, to jump into anything like that. And, I think even over the next couple of months, we'll be releasing some vlogs showing buildings, and we will actually show some advertisements or billboards on those buildings to give an impression of what advertising might look like inside of Earth 2. But I think a lot of these platforms are way outside of being able to, to commit to anything just yet.
No, that's really interesting, and it kind of informs the next question too. By the way, we're getting oodles of live questions, so I'm seeing them come in. I'm trying to even combine, some of them that are coming through here. But if interoperability is kind of an issue, a lot of brands obviously want to market and to have a relationship with customers throughout the entire consumer journey. So what's the metaverse's role there, if brands are looking at that? Tuomas or Connie, do you want to jump in maybe on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I would go back to my previous response actually around what role particular metaverse platforms, or the individual, what I would call metaverse-like platforms, if we use the Shane's kind of terminology around if there can only be one interoperable metaverse. We're quite far away from that at the moment. But when we look at these individual metaverse-like experiences, for every brand, the entry points and the parts in the customer journey that those platforms play will be very, very different, and not that dissimilar to the Web 2 strategies. Some people sell through marketplaces, some people sell through their own websites. The same thing if we're creating experiences in the real world. Some create them inside of their stores, some rent space elsewhere to create them. And I think from a customer journey perspective, it's no different. Do you buy land for your brand to have some kind of a brand space inside of Decentraland? That works with certain brands really well, and that can actually become a really critical part of their customer journey. For Nike, for example, Nike Land inside of Roblox has avatar customer service and sales representatives. What does that do? That creates jobs, that creates new opportunities to engage, it creates all kinds of things, but that might not work for every brand, for example. So I think carefully about how these individual platforms will play to your overall strategy will be the key.
Yeah, the role of brands in the metaverse world will be completely changed, and the way they manage consumer journey will also be altered. Like from storytelling to story making, where metaverse has really put power on people's hand to co-create the brand together, and direct to customer versus to avatar. The way we understand the consumer insight, the process will become way more complex than before. And like live events versus virtual events, the time and space to consumer engage with brands will be infinite possibilities now. So yeah, it will be a huge challenge and also consideration for how brands manage the consumer journey from in the metaverse world.
I'm combining a bunch of questions here too, but there's some that are asking, you know, what kinds of brands would be out of place in the metaverse, and others are asking about healthcare brands. And we had one even more specifically about, you know, luxury skincare brands, and it's really interesting because you don't think of products for your body in the metaverse where your body isn't present, right? But I guess you could say that your body's not in TV either, right? And that kind of thing. But do you have any? Have you seen any examples in, I guess, kind of the healthcare or ideas around kind of what, say, if you're a you know, cosmetic or health brand, what you could do?
Yeah, there are a lot of exciting things happening already. For example, like Gucci and NARS have joined this recent Decentraland Meta Fashion Week with a few other brands to launch the Metaverse initiative. And many brands have already actively collaborated with virtual influencer, male and female, to drive conversation and conversion on social and e-commerce. I think another interesting angle would be to see how sensorial experience are reshaped with Metaverse and with technology. For example, like through integrating physical sense in meta space to deepen the immersions, how 5 sense transformed across like how you touch to see or taste to hear. I think these are a few interesting areas that luxury skincare brand can think about, like how to reshape the sensory experience is something that will be super interesting.
I realize we're just about out of time. You know, maybe I'll go to this question, which is just about kind of, you know, what I guess would be the biggest, you know, protocol or software or hardware that you know think will, you know, really advance the metaverse and maybe bring it into reality sooner, or maybe even just influence it dramatically. I don't know if, you know, Shane, you have a thought on this, or anyone. Is there sort of a missing piece to the puzzle that's like waiting to drop that will accelerate in metaverse development?
I mean, I guess everybody might want to have something very quickly to say about that, but if I just jump in, I think it is obviously just a progression of technology, and from Earth 2's perspective, I realize that the long-term goals of Earth 2 are going to become realized over time. It's not something that's going to happen next year or in the next few years to the level that we want it to occur. But there is the possibility to do it in steps, and that's what we're doing here. We're kind of being visionaries in looking into the future and realizing that there is going to be, as the hardware and other technology catches up. I mean, you only have to look at NVIDIA. The tech that they're building is just absolutely amazing. There's lots of different companies around the world building different tech that is going to lead us, whether it's haptic suits or VR goggle sets, whatever it may be. It's all going to lead us into the metaverse. So the vision that Earth 2 has is that what we're trying to create is that visual platform, the software platform for it. And that will gradually expand over time as technology catches up. So from our perspective, it's a visionary thing. We want to build the platform, the foundation that people are going to be able to centralize and interconnect on inside of the metaverse from a visual perspective. And we'll of course be partnering with or using technology that becomes available over the next couple of years and beyond.
Great. I would get everyone else's thoughts, but we have hit the end of the hour here, so that's unfortunately all the time we had. We could literally go on for about 3 hours with all the great questions that are coming in. So thanks to everyone for watching, and thanks for the questions that you sent in, your participation. Obviously, I want to thank our panelists as well, including RGA China Head of Strategy Connie Ho and APAC Managing Director Tuomas Peltoniemi. Also GM's Director of Marketing Dean Sciole and Earth 2 founder Shane Isaac. Thanks everyone, and let me throw it back to you, Tuomas, maybe for the final word.
Thank you very much, everyone, for spending a part of your morning or your afternoon with us today. Thank you to all the panelists. We will be publishing this event on our website. It will also have translations, subtitles in Japanese and Chinese. So stay on the lookout for that. Thank you again very much, and have a great rest of the week.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me.
Thank you.